Good morning, Lowestoft. Welcome to the 10:30-ish with me, Esther. I head up the Lowestoft Town Centre Chaplaincy team, and usually on this time on a Friday morning, we would be in the Coconut Loft, or we would be out in Kirkley, chatting to you, praying with you, giving you gifts and all sorts. Obviously we can't do that this morning, and it is also raining, so we are bringing you live thoughts Monday, Wednesday and Friday from lockdown, and our hope and prayer is just that they speak something into your situation, that they mean something, that they help you with some processing. We're all about our emotional and spiritual journeys in life, so we hope that these speak into that for you, and yeah, that's what we're here for. So I just wondered how you are this morning. I just have to say, I don't know if you can tell by my voice, I am exhausted this morning. I am so tired, and I'm not entirely sure why, because it hasn't really been a busier week, but there's a slight feeling of maybe it's helplessness this week, do you know, with everything that's going on with lockdown and like global riots and all the things that are going on. There's maybe an exhaustion from all the things that you know you can't fix. What are you supposed to do properly in a time where your actions are limited and we're all in flux? Morning, Nina, nice to see you, hope you're okay. And so yeah, so that's where I am this morning, and I just find that repeatedly the Jesus story, that the Jesus path that I follow, speaks into our situations, like just all the time. We live in a time where I guess we feel a bit helpless, don't we, in general, in face of like global situations, global power, national power. We've had our freedom taken away from us hugely, haven't we, in the past few months, for our own good, to do with COVID, but we're also now faced with the reality of like living in a system where it's, some people are really powerless, where it's set up against people at times, where it's a system of judgment, of violence, of force being used to perpetuate that system, as well as people rising up against it. Morning, Pete. Morning, Ian. Nice to see you with us. And it just struck me that we all have judgments that we make, don't we? Like, we're all very busy on social media posting our thoughts and our responses, and we make judgments really quickly on all sides, don't we, of what is right and what is wrong and who's an idiot and who isn't. Struck me that maybe that's so often the problem. We're really, really quick to judge, even when it seems clear cut. Yeah. And sometimes we ask, I think, and I ask, like, why doesn't God just stop all of this? If there is a God, like some of you may not believe there is, but if there is, why doesn't he just sort this out? Like, there is massive injustice. Like, is he absent? Like, does it prove he doesn't exist? It's really confusing, I think, and it's painful. It's like, if there's a God, why doesn't he just reach out into the mess of all of it and make it good? It's just a big question, isn't it? And I want to hold on to that thought on that question this morning, because I think there are some answers, but they're not always easy and they're not always obvious, and they don't answer everything. And I think the answer comes partly in the story of one man and another man, because change tends to happen face to face with individuals, doesn't it? And we often don't see that in the world. We don't see the one-on-one change that's happening. So I want to take you back, I guess, because in first century Palestine, when the Jesus story is going on, Israel is under occupation by the Romans. Like, we forget that these stories are of a people trampled on, like taken by force. People have died. People have had to declare that Caesar is Lord, otherwise they just won't survive. In essence, they've had to like declare allegiance to a system and a person that they reject just so they can survive. People's voices have been trampled by oppression. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Like, that story is our story. That story is people's story now, isn't it? In little ways and in big ways, we all can relate to that. And in the midst of this, the local Jewish people have had to work out how to survive, as you do. And one of the options for them was to become an enemy collaborator, or a tax collector, as they're better known. So, like, your job as a tax collector is to collect the taxes levied on imports and exports. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. To tax traders, to tax workers. You're like a leech sucking the money out of hard-working people's lives into the coffers of the empire. And you often keep a little bit extra for yourself. But from this, you get really rich. And then because of it, you are despised by people. Like, who has any time for that sort of person that just uses empire for their own advantage, that lords power over people, that just abuses those around them? We all know those people, don't we? And we just have no time for them. And in Jesus's time, the religious authorities would have rejected you as unclean if you were that person. The local people would see you as a traitor. Your testimony was invalid in court. It's like quite a big deal. And I think as people maybe like us who live in the West, who live in privilege, who don't live in occupied countries, we might hear that and think, oh, isn't that wrong? Isn't that sad? Like, we might look at stuff going on in America and go, oh, isn't that wrong? Isn't that sad? But we speak from a particular position, don't we? And if you're someone who lives now feeling exploited, like by your boss, by the benefit system, by institutional racism that keeps you living in fear, by postcode lotteries of health and social care that you don't have the power to fight, you're going to hear a completely different story, right? I bet you resonate with the hate, with the disgust, with the just intolerance and lack of respect for the tax collectors. Like, this story is our story. It speaks to us. So what's to be done? Like, the Jewish people believed their Messiah, a saviour, was going to come and physically overthrow the empire and free them. That's what some expected Jesus to do. And at the minute we see riots going on, don't we? Because people want to overthrow the system. They want their voice to be heard. They want change. But here's what Jesus did. He brought healing one person at a time. And he invites us to do that, I think. I think that's where our role comes in. So I want you to picture it. This tax collector called Matthew is in his tax collecting booth, I guess, something like that. Maybe he's proud. Maybe he's really self-satisfied because he's got loads of money. He feels he's like above everybody else. He's like, all right, Jack, he's doing okay. The system is benefiting him. He's got everything that he wants. But it could also be that that's mixed up, because it's never simple and clear cut, is it? It's mixed up with shame, loneliness. It's lonely at the top, like, it's confusing. Maybe he's built up this narrative of his life that justifies his position. Like, we all do that, don't we? Well, I do this because, and that's okay. It's like, really, get over it. Look at yourself a little bit. We all need to, don't we? And Jesus, this prophet, this healer, this unexpected Messiah who claims to be God, walks up to this self-satisfied tax collector who's got this narrative of life that justifies his position, that hides his shame. And maybe he's expecting a telling off, you know, like a riot, like a public shaming. Maybe he's armed for it and he's ready for a fight. I think I would be. But Jesus looks at him and says, why don't you follow me? Come and be my disciple. It's like he says, leave this life now. Come and learn from me. Let's start something new. Let's be part of something. Let's bring some change. Like, there's no judgment there. There's no punishment. There's no public shaming. And maybe some of you are living a path that you just think, what the heck? Who were local fishermen who would have known and hated this tax collector, were really not happy about his inclusion into their group. Like, they've been bullied by him, they've been exploited, they've been ripped off by this arrogant traitor, this man who's had power over them. And now, like, Jesus has invited him to join their group, your way of life, where it's easy to hate other people. But actually, Jesus invites other people in, and he invites us in as well, which is tricky sometimes, isn't it? So, like, why does Matthew say yes? Like, it means leaving his post. It probably puts him in danger with the Romans. It means not doing his job. And it just made me think sometimes that could it be that Matthew's just really stuck? Like, it's really easy to judge someone else, isn't it, on what they do? But so often we are stuck in a feel powerless to get out of, right? He's got his privilege, and you can be stuck in that. He can be stuck in his shame. maybe he's not sure how to escape it. Maybe he's just not got the courage to. Like, it's hard to change, isn't it? Maybe he's scared he's going to be rejected, whatever he does. But Jesus gives him a way out. Like, he calls to him from something that he's already into inclusion. He calls him into acceptance. Like, some don't need a public telling off, do we? Because the act that pulls us out of our stupid position is just an invitation to see something new. It's being loved, isn't it? It's love in action. Mainly that's what we need in this world. And in response, like, Matthew is so overwhelmed by this inclusion and this acceptance and this love that comes his way from Jesus, that he invites Jesus and all his friends to dinner into his home. Like, this is a massive act of hospitality and vulnerability in a world of some people are clean, some people are unclean, some people are accepted, some people are rejected, some are powerful, some are weak. Like, since when do tax collectors eat with fishermen? Since when do people who see the world completely differently dare to dialogue, to meet over food, to recognise their mutual humanity, you know? Find points of connection, break through the fear and the shame and the prejudice. Like, have you chatted to, say, the person in town who has no home, who's sitting in Lowestoft in the rain at the minute? Have you found that they're not a homeless person, but they are a man or a woman with a story that has points of contact with your story? Like, have you dared to try and see the world from someone else's point of view, and then been shown where you're blind and where you're wrong, maybe where you're right, but also been shown a deeper understanding? So Jesus is totally criticised for eating with Matthew. Like, the people that think they're good don't think he should be hanging out with somebody who isn't. And it's really interesting because Jesus' response is he talks about it in medical terms. Like, he basically goes, it's not healthy people who need a doctor. Like, what are you talking about? It's sick people that need a doctor. In essence, he says, I've come for the people who are messed up and need healing, and for those who recognise that they are. Like, I haven't come for healthy people. I've come to bring healing for those that need it. So in our world, I just think at the minute, Jesus will be crying with all of the people that feel oppressed, who live under the boot of an empire, who live under institutional prejudice and control, who are kept in poverty so that others can be rich. He cries with you when you're stuck in that place. And he invites you to follow him and to find a new mindset and new freedom. But I also think he will be calling to those perpetuating the problem. You know, he calls to the racist police officers. He calls to President Trump wielding a Bible to look good. You know, he calls to those in the UK making policy. He calls to those shouting racist slurs in the street. He calls to you. He calls to me in all of our positions, our mindsets, all the ways that we perpetuate ignorance, all the systems we're part of, all the ways that we judge others and shame them, all the ways that we're stuck, you know. He calls to us and invites us to follow him. He says he'll sit and have dinner with us, like the ultimate act of hospitality and getting to know you, like sitting with someone over food, because he comes to heal us, you know, in all the ways we're broken, in ways we've been shaped by ignorance and prejudice and privilege and empire and oppression. So I guess back to our first question, like, what on earth has God got to do with empire and institution and racism and problems? Like, why isn't he sorting it out? It's like, how does Jesus deal with it? Do you know what he dealt with it? One person at a time. Speaking love, inviting acceptance, sitting down over food and listening to somebody who has a completely different viewpoint for you, and dialoguing and learning. He broke down misunderstanding. He also, in other places, totally reacts really strongly against empire. Do you know what? He speaks really painful truths to people. He challenges the face of those that are perpetuating oppression. He really does. But right here, he takes people as individuals and he loves them in all of their brokenness and their ignorance and their stupidity. And I think that's what challenges me the most, like where do you start reacting against oppression? Maybe it's just dialoguing and loving people, and that's what Jesus did. And you know what? Ultimately, Jesus challenged the system to the point that he was murdered for it. In a rigged trial with a prejudiced government and rioting people. Like, let's not think that God doesn't know what it's like to challenge and suffer the consequences of it. And I think that ultimately Jesus's death and his defeating of death, which may sound like nonsense to you, but it proves that God doesn't just leave this all to go on. That at a point in history he defeated the source of the evil, the evil that we see among us that gets control of us and causes us problems, and he limits its ultimate control over us, and most importantly he gives us a way to be empowered by his goodness and truth to be the change that we want to see. Like, don't you want to be able to be the change and the goodness in the world? Like, that's where Jesus says, do you know what? The Spirit of God is yours if you want it. Ask for it. Be like Matthew. Be prepared to leave behind your little booth, your worldview and your way of seeing things, to come and dialogue with the Creator so that you can see things differently, to help you dialogue with other people and be part of bringing change. So, yeah, I guess that's the thing that we think of today. So I guess that's my ramble, but may you today, in your place where you just feel oppressed and downtrodden and misunderstood, where you suffer the boot of the empire and institutional prejudice and racism and wealth pressed down on you, keeping you in your position, may you know that Jesus comes to you. He calls you to follow him. He says he's going to react against the oppression, that he's here to bring freedom and to bring life and to bring hope. And that's the message for you. But also, may you know that if you are part of the problem, that if you are sat in your booth feeling self-satisfied, if you live in a world that is quite easy because you get to live in the West, because you get to live with a job, because you get to live with money, because it seems to work for you, may you know that Jesus comes to you as well and says, just follow me. Just follow me. So that's my thought for today, Lowestoft. I hope that makes some kind of sense. It's the challenge that I put to myself. I will be back on next Monday, and then Wednesday and Friday, bringing a thought for the day. I'm also going to start posting these onto YouTube at London Road Baptist Church on their channel. So trying to work out how we can go back out into Lowestoft and be physically about. So it's good to see you, and do leave us some comments in the chat. Take care. Bye.